The diplomatic station floated in the empty space between two star systems. It was a massive structure, built from black metal and glowing crystals. Inside its walls, species from across the galaxy met to talk, trade, and sometimes argue. Today, it would witness something nobody expected. Ambassador Park Yuna walked through the tall doors of the reception chamber. She was a small woman, barely reaching 5 feet and 4 inches. Her black hair was tied back in a simple knot, and she wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Behind her walked her aide, a young man named Kim Do-won, who carried a tablet and tried very hard not to look nervous. The chamber was built for giants. The ceiling rose 30 feet above them, and the chairs around the central table could fit 3 humans each. This was because the room belonged to the Vulturi. Yuna had studied the files on the Vulturi for months before this meeting. They were the most feared species in the known galaxy. They stood 7 feet tall on average, with bodies covered in sleek gray fur. They walked on 2 legs like humans, but that was where the similarities ended. Each Vulturi had 4 eyes that glowed amber in dim light. Their hands ended in claws that could cut through metal. Their teeth were made for tearing flesh. For 10,000 years, the Vulturi had conquered and ruled. Entire civilizations had fallen before them. Other species paid tribute just to avoid their attention. They controlled a quarter of all known space, and they answered to no one. And today, a human woman had asked to speak with them about friendship. The Vulturi delegation was already present. 12 of them stood around the room, their eyes tracking every movement Yuna made. They wore no armor, no weapons. They did not need them. Their bodies were weapons enough. At the head of the table sat the High Matriarch. Her name was Theska, and she was ancient even by Vulturi standards. Scars crossed her face and arms, memories of battles fought long before humans learned to make fire. She watched Yuna approach with a stillness that reminded Do-won of a cat watching a mouse. Yuna stopped at the proper distance and bowed her head slightly. Not too deep, not too shallow. Respect without submission. She had practiced this gesture 100 times. "High Matriarch Theska," Yuna said. Her voice was calm and clear. "I am honored to stand before you. I bring greetings from Earth and from all of humanity." Theska did not move. Her 4 eyes blinked slowly, 2 at a time. When she spoke, her voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You are small," Theska said. "Your species is young. You have no claws, no fangs, no armor. You come from a single world at the edge of explored space." She leaned forward slightly. Why should the Vulturi care what humans want? It was a test. Yuna knew it was a test. Every other species that had stood in this room had responded with fear. They had offered gifts, made promises, begged for mercy. The Vulturi respected none of them. Yuna smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. "Because we are not afraid of you," she said simply. The room went silent. Every Vulturi in the chamber turned to look at her. Do-won felt his heart stop for a moment. He was certain they were about to die, but Theska did not attack. Instead, something strange happened. Her ears twitched forward, a tiny movement that Yuna's research told her meant curiosity. "You do not tremble," Theska observed. "Should I?" Yuna asked. The question was honest. She genuinely wanted to know. Before Theska could answer, chaos exploded across the chamber. A door at the side of the room burst open. 2 Vulturi guards stumbled through, reaching for something small and fast. But they were too slow. A gray blur shot across the polished floor, moving with the wild energy of youth. It was a cub. A Vulturi child, perhaps 3 or 4 years old in human terms. He was small compared to the adults, only reaching Yuna's shoulder, but he was still larger than most Earth predators. His fur was lighter gray than the adults, and his 4 eyes were bright with mischief. "Reckon!" one of the guards shouted. "Stop!" But Reckon did not stop. He had spent the entire morning trapped in a side room, bored and restless, while the adults talked about boring things. Now he was free, and he had spotted something interesting. The human. The small one with the strange flat face and the dark hair. She smelled different from anything he had ever encountered. Not like fear, not like prey. Something else entirely. He wanted to know what she tasted like. Reckon launched himself across the final distance. His small jaws opened wide, showing teeth that were already sharp enough to cut bone. He aimed for the human's arm. Time seemed to slow down. Do-Wan saw what was about to happen and opened his mouth to scream. The guards lunged forward, but knew they would be too late. Theska rose from her seat, her ancient instincts recognizing danger. Reckon's teeth clamped down on Yuna's sleeve. He bit hard, his jaw locking the way all Vulturi jaws did when they caught prey. His instincts told him to shake his head, to tear, to rip. Every other creature he had bitten had screamed and tried to run. That was what prey did. Yuna looked down at the cub attached to her arm. She did not scream. She did not run. She did not even look scared. Instead, she grinned. It was a wide, delighted grin, the kind of smile a person makes when they see something wonderful and unexpected. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. A small laugh escaped her lips. "Well, hello there," she said to the cub. "Aren't you a fierce little one?" And then she did something that would be talked about for centuries. She tugged back. Not hard enough to hurt, not hard enough to scare. Just enough to engage, to play, to say, "I am not prey, and this is a game." Reckon's 4 eyes went wide. His tail, which had been stiff with hunting tension, began to wag. It was a movement the Vulturi tried to hide from other species because it showed not aggression, but joy. The most feared predators in the galaxy wagged their tails when they were happy. And this tiny human had just made a Vulturi cub wag his tail. Theska stood frozen. She had lived for centuries. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had never, in all her long years, seen anything like this. The human was playing with her grandson, and she was winning. The silence in the chamber was complete. Not a single being moved. Not a single breath was taken. Every eye in the room was fixed on the small human woman and the Vulturi cub attached to her sleeve. Reckon did not understand what was happening. His whole life, things had worked in a simple way. He bid something, and that something tried to escape. It screamed. It kicked. It ran. That was how the game worked. That was how it had always worked. But this creature was not playing by the rules. The human tugged again, gentle but firm. Her arm moved back, pulling Reckon slightly off balance. He adjusted his grip, his claws scratching against the floor for purchase. His tail wagged faster. "Oh, you have a strong jaw," the human said. Her voice was warm, almost affectionate. "But I think you will need to try harder than that." She tugged a 3rd time. This time, Reckon growled. It was a playful growl, the kind young Vulturi made when wrestling with their siblings. He shook his head back and forth, trying to pull the sleeve away from her. Yuna laughed. It was a bright, happy sound that echoed through the tall chamber. She shifted her stance, planting her feet wider, and held her ground against the cub's pulling. "That is better," she said. "Show me what you have got." Kim Do-Wan stood 5 feet behind his ambassador, his tablet forgotten in his frozen hands. His mind was racing through everything he knew about the Vulturi. Their bite force was measured in tons. Their claws could slice through ship hulls. Their young were taught to hunt almost from birth. And Ambassador Park Yuna was playing tug of war with one of them. He looked at Theska. The High Matriarch had not moved from her half-risen position. Her 4 eyes were wide, wider than Do-Wan had seen in any of the briefing videos. Her claws were extended, digging into the table in front of her, but she made no move to approach. She was confused. Doan realized with a shock that the most powerful being in this part of the galaxy was genuinely confused. Reckon released Yuna's sleeve suddenly. She stumbled back a step, caught off guard. The cub dropped into a play stance, his front half low to the ground, his rear end high in the air. His tail wagged so fast it was almost a blur. Yuna recognized that stance. She had seen it 1,000 times before. "You want to go again?" she asked. "All right then." She held out her arm. The sleeve was torn now, wet with saliva, but she did not seem to care. Reckon's eyes tracked the movement with intense focus. "Yuna," Doan whispered. His voice was barely audible. "Yuna, please be careful." She glanced back at him and winked. Then she waved her arm slightly, making the torn sleeve flutter. Reckon pounced. This time, Yuna was ready. She pulled her arm back at the last moment, making the cub miss. He skidded across the floor, turned, and pounced again. Again, she moved. Again, he missed. On the third try, she let him catch the sleeve. He grabbed it with his teeth and pulled hard. Yuna pulled back. They struggled for a moment, neither willing to give ground. Then Yuna did something unexpected. She let go. Reckon tumbled backwards, the torn piece of sleeve in his mouth. He rolled twice before coming to a stop, looking absolutely delighted. He shook the fabric like a prize, growling happily. "You win that round," Yuna said. She was breathing a little hard now, but she was still smiling. "But I want my sleeve back." She walked toward the cub. Not fast, not slow. Just a calm, steady approach. Reckon watched her come, the fabric still in his mouth. His body tensed, ready to run if she tried to chase him. But Yuna did not chase. She stopped a few feet away and sat down on the floor. Just sat, crossing her legs beneath her. She was now shorter than the cub, looking up at him. "Will you trade?" she asked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and colorful. It was a ball made of woven rope, the kind humans used for their pet dogs back on Earth. "I think you might like this better." She rolled the ball toward Reckon. It bounced across the floor, making an interesting sound. The cub's eyes locked onto it immediately. His ears perked forward. The sleeve dropped from his mouth. He pounced on the ball. For the next several minutes, Yuna played with Reckon on the floor of the Vulturi diplomatic chamber. She rolled the ball. He chased it. He brought it back to her, and she rolled it again. Sometimes she pretended to throw it, but did not, and Reckon would run after nothing, then come back with a confused but happy expression. The other Vulturi watched in absolute silence. They were witnesses to something that had never happened before in their entire history. A prey species was playing with one of their young, and their young was loving it. Finally, Fesca moved. She walked around the table, her steps slow and careful. The guards tensed but did not stop her. She approached Yuna, who was now scratching behind Reckon's ears, while the cub made a rumbling sound of contentment. "How did you know?" Fesca asked. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. It was a tone no outsider had ever heard from her before. Yuna looked up. She did not stand. She did not show fear. She just looked at the ancient matriarch with those warm brown eyes. Know what? That he would not hurt you. That he wanted to play. Fesca's voice carried centuries of confusion. Every other species runs from our young. They see teeth and claws and death. They do not see. She struggled for the right word. A child? Yuna offered. A young one who is bored and curious and full of energy. Fesca nodded slowly. Yuna smiled. "Where I come from, High Matriarch, we have many creatures with teeth and claws. Lions, tigers, wolves, bears. We grew up surrounded by predators." She scratched Reckon's ears again, and the cub pressed against her hand. We learned long ago that they are not just killers. They are mothers and fathers and children. They play. They love. They protect. She looked down at Reckon, who had rolled onto his back and was pawing at the air, waiting for belly rubs. Your grandson is beautiful, Una said. And he has very good teeth. He will be a strong hunter someday. Theska stared at the human for a long moment. Then, slowly, she sat down on the floor as well. It was an action she had not taken in public for over 200 years. High matriarchs did not sit on floors. It was undignified. But right now, Theska did not care about dignity. She wanted to understand these strange creatures who looked at Vulturi and saw something worth loving. Tell me about your world, Theska said. Tell me about these lions and wolves and bears. And Una, sitting on the floor with a Vulturi cub in her lap, began to talk. The formal negotiations had been paused. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone understood that what was happening on the floor was more important than any trade agreement or treaty. Reckon had fallen asleep in Una's lap. The cub was heavy, at least 60 pounds of muscle and fur, but she did not seem to mind. She stroked his back gently while she talked, and his tail twitched occasionally in his dreams. We called them wolves, Una was saying. They lived in the cold forests and mountains of our world. They hunted in packs, just like your people. They had sharp teeth and strong jaws and golden eyes that glowed in the dark. Theska listened with complete attention. The other Vulturi had moved closer, forming a loose circle around the two females and the sleeping cub. They were careful and quiet, as if they were afraid that too much noise would break whatever spell had fallen over the room. Did you hunt them? Theska asked. These wolves? Some humans did, Una admitted. In the beginning, we were enemies. They killed our animals. We killed their pack members. It was a war that lasted thousands of years. But then something changed. It was not a question. Theska could see it in the human's eyes. There was more to this story. Una nodded. One day, a very long time ago, a human did something strange. Instead of killing a wolf pup, she brought it home. She fed it. She played with it. She raised it alongside her own children. Theska's fur rippled. It was a sign of deep emotion among the Vulturi, one they usually hid from outsiders. She adopted a predator? She did. And that wolf pup grew up loving her family. It protected them. It helped them hunt. It slept by their fire and kept them warm through cold nights. Una smiled down at Reckon. That wolf had puppies of its own. And those puppies were raised by humans too. Generation after generation, we shaped each other. We became partners, friends, family. Kim Do-hwan had moved to stand near a group of Vulturi guards. They were watching him with those four-eyed stares, but there was no aggression in their posture. Just curiosity, just like their matriarch. Your aide, one of the guards said. His voice was deep, but young. He is afraid. Do-hwan did not deny it. A little, he admitted. I am not as brave as my ambassador. The guard tilted his head. But you came anyway. Into a room full of creatures who could kill you with one swipe. Why? It was a fair question. Do-hwan had asked himself the same thing many times during the journey here. Because she asked me to, he said finally. And because I trust her. If she says this will work, then it will work. The guard made a rumbling sound in his chest. After a moment, Do-hwan realized it was laughter. Your pack, the guard said. You follow your alpha into danger because you trust her judgment. Do-hwan had never thought of it that way, but the guard was right. That was exactly what this was. Yes, he said. I suppose we are. The guard nodded, and something changed in his eyes. Respect, perhaps. Recognition. Back on the floor. Theska was leaning close to Una. Her voice had dropped low, so only the human could hear. You must understand, Theska said. For 10,000 years, every species we have met has feared us. They tremble. They beg. They offer us everything we want, just so we will leave them alone. Her claws flexed against the floor. Even the ones who fight us, they fight from fear. They fear what we will do if they lose. That must be lonely, Una said softly. Theska froze. In all her centuries of life, no one had ever said that to her. No one had ever looked at the high matriarch of the Vulturi and seen loneliness. It is, she admitted. The words came out rough, as if they had been stuck in her throat for a very long time. We are the monsters of the galaxy. Parents tell their children stories about us to make them behave. Diplomats send their lowest officials to meet with us because they expect those officials to die. She looked at Una with ancient, tired eyes. Do you know how long it has been since someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a weapon? Una did not answer with words. Instead, she did something that made every guard in the room tense with alarm. She reached out and took Theska's hand. The matriarch's claws could have opened Una's throat in half a second. Her grip could have crushed every bone in the human's fingers. But Una held on anyway, her small soft hand wrapped around those deadly claws. I see you, Una said. I see a mother who loves her grandson. I see a leader who has carried the weight of her people for centuries. I see someone who is very tired and very strong and very much in need of a friend. Theska's hand trembled. Her 4 eyes blinked rapidly, and for one terrifying moment, Dohan thought she was about to attack. Then the High Matriarch did something that had not happened in living memory. She cried. The tears were not like human tears. They were thicker, almost silver, and they fell from all 4 eyes at once. Theska made no sound, but her whole body shook with the release of emotion she had locked away for far too long. Reckon woke up. He looked at his grandmother, then at Una, then back at his grandmother. His young mind did not understand what was happening, but he understood that his grandmother was sad. He crawled out of Una's lap and pressed himself against Theska's side, making soft whimpering sounds. Una did not let go of Theska's hand. She held on through all of it, a small anchor of warmth in a room full of predators. Your species, Theska finally said. Her voice was rough with emotion. You are not prey. No, Una agreed. We are not. You are not predators either. Not like us. No, we are something else. Theska looked at her grandson, who was now licking her face with his rough tongue, trying to make her feel better. Then she looked at the human who had somehow, in the space of an hour, broken through walls that had stood for 10,000 years. What are you? Theska asked. Una smiled. It was the same warm smile she had given Reckon when he first bit her sleeve. We are the ones who make friends, she said. With wolves. With horses. With cats and birds and snakes. With anything that will let us. She squeezed Theska's hand gently. Even with the monsters. Theska laughed. It was a broken, rusty sound, like a machine that had not been used in years. But it was real. Even with the monsters, she repeated. You humans are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Una admitted. But it has worked out for us so far. Theska looked at her hand, still held in Una's grip. The human's fingers were so fragile, so easy to break. And yet they held on with a strength that had nothing to do with muscle or bone. I think, Theska said slowly, that I would like to be your friend. And with those words, history changed. News traveled fast in the galaxy. By the time the diplomatic session officially resumed, rumors had spread to every corner of the station. Other species whispered in corridors and stared through observation windows. Recording devices that were definitely not allowed in secure areas suddenly appeared everywhere. The human had made a Vulturi cub wag its tail. The human had made the High Matriarch cry. The human had held a predator's claws in her bare hand and lived. Nobody could quite believe it. The formal negotiations were supposed to discuss trade routes and resource sharing. Instead, Theska and Una spent 3 hours talking about children, about raising young ones who were wild and full of energy, about teaching them to be strong without being cruel, about the fear every mother feels when her child goes out into a dangerous world. Reckon refused to leave Una's side. He sat at her feet during the talks, occasionally chewing on the rope ball she had given him. Sometimes he would put his head in her lap, and she would scratch behind his ears without even pausing in her sentences. The other Vulturi watched this with expressions that ranged from shock to wonder. Some of the younger ones had started wagging their tails slightly, then caught themselves and forced them to stop. It was embarrassing to show such emotion in public. During a break in the discussions, Dohan found himself surrounded by delegates from other species. They had been watching from the gallery above, and now they wanted answers. How? Demanded a tall creature with blue skin and too many arms. He was from the Melkori, a species that had been trying to make peace with the Vulturi for 500 years. How did she do it? We have offered them planets. We have offered them fleets. They spit on our offers and demand more. You offered them things, Dohan said. He was tired, but he tried to explain. We offered them understanding. Understanding? The Melkori made a sound of disgust. What is there to understand? They are killers. They take what they want and destroy what they do not want. That is all they are. Dohan shook his head. No, that is what they do. It is not what they are. Another delegate pushed forward. This one was small and covered in feathers, with a beak that clicked when she talked. She was from the Kirathi, a species that paid heavy tribute to the Vulturi every year just to avoid being conquered. Then tell us, she clicked. What are they? Dohan looked across the room. Una was talking with Theska, their heads close together. Reckon was playing with 2 young Vulturi guards, who seemed both embarrassed and delighted to be included in his games. They are pack animals, Dohan said. Like us. They have families and children and elders they respect. They play games. They tell stories. They remember their dead and celebrate their living. He turned back to the delegates. You look at them and see predators. We look at them and see people who have been alone for a very long time. The Melkori was not convinced. Pretty words. But words do not stop claws. No, Dohan agreed. But trust does. Pack bonds do. Loyalty does. He smiled slightly. My ambassador has 3 dogs at home. Rescue animals that nobody else wanted. One of them was so aggressive that the shelter was going to put him down. She took him anyway. She spent a year earning his trust, teaching him that not all hands bring pain. And now? Now he sleeps at the foot of her bed and growls at anyone who comes too close to her. Dohan looked at the delegates with serious eyes. That is what humans do. We find the creatures everyone else fears, and we love them until they love us back. The Kirathi delegate's feathers ruffled thoughtfully. That is insane. Probably, Dohan admitted. But it works. Back at the main table, Theska had called for a formal vote among her advisors. This was unusual. The High Matriarch rarely asked for opinions. She gave orders and others obeyed. But today, she wanted consensus. The humans have requested an alliance, Theska said. Her voice carried through the chamber, clear and strong. Not tribute. Not submission. An alliance of equals. Partners in trade and defense and exploration. One of the older advisors spoke up. His fur was white with age, and his voice creaked like old wood. This is unprecedented. We do not have allies. We have subjects and enemies. Nothing else. Perhaps it is time for something else, Theska said. Another advisor, a female with scars across her muzzle, leaned forward. They are weak, small. What could they possibly offer us? They are not weak. The voice came from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look. It was one of the young guards who had been playing with Reckon. He stood straight, though his tail was tucked nervously behind him. "Speak," Theska commanded. The young guard swallowed hard but continued. "I watched the human, the female one. She is small, yes. She has no claws or fangs. But when the cub bit her, she did not scream. She did not run. She laughed." His voice grew stronger. "I have been a guard for 15 years. I have seen ambassadors from 100 species come through those doors. Every single one of them was afraid of us. Every single one." He pointed at Yuna, who was watching the discussion with calm interest. "She is not afraid. And neither is the male who came with her. They look at us like we are people, not monsters." The guard's tail slowly began to wag, and this time he did not try to stop it. "I do not know what they can offer us in ships or weapons or resources. But I know what they have already given us today." "And what is that?" the scarred advisor demanded. The guard met her eyes without flinching. They looked at us without fear. For the first time in my life, I felt like something other than a weapon. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "That is worth more than planets." The chamber fell silent. Theska looked at the young guard for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Wise words from an unexpected source," she said. "Does anyone else wish to speak?" No one did. Theska turned to Yuna. "Ambassador Park, your proposal is unusual. Your species is young and unknown. You have nothing we could not take by force if we wanted it." She paused, and something that might have been a smile crossed her ancient face. "But you have given my grandson a toy and my guards hope. You have given me tears I thought had dried up centuries ago." She stood, rising to her full height. 7 feet of muscle and claw and power, the most feared being in the galaxy. Then she bowed. Not a small bow of greeting. A full, deep bow of respect. The kind the Vulturi only gave to their most honored enemies. "Earth has a friend in the Vulturi," Theska said. "Let us discuss what that friendship means." In the observation gallery, the delegates from other species watched in stunned silence. The Malkori's many arms hung limp at his sides. The Kirithi's feathers lay flat with shock. A single human woman had done in one day what 100 species had failed to do in 10,000 years. She had made the monsters bow. 6 months passed. They were the strangest 6 months in galactic history. The human Vulturi Compact was signed on a space station that orbited Earth's moon. Theska came in person, bringing a delegation of 50 Vulturi, including Riken, who had grown several inches taller, but still wagged his tail every time he saw Yuna. The signing ceremony was broadcast to every corner of known space. Billions of beings watched as the most feared species in the galaxy formed a partnership with one of the youngest. Military experts predicted disaster. Economists predicted exploitation. Political scientists predicted betrayal. None of them understood what was really happening. The first exchange program started 3 months after the signing. Human children traveled to Vulturi worlds to study. Vulturi cubs came to Earth. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the inevitable tragedy. Instead, something wonderful happened. On the Vulturi homeworld, human children discovered that the terrifying predators loved games. Hide and seek became a planetary sensation. Tag evolved into a sport that combined running, climbing, and what could only be described as friendly ambush. Human kids learned to read Vulturi body language, to understand when a growl meant anger and when it meant excitement. On Earth, Vulturi cubs discovered dogs. The first meeting was an accident. A young Vulturi named Soren was staying with a host family in a place called Korea. The family had a pet, a golden retriever named Bomi. When Soren first saw the animal, he froze. His instincts told him this was a predator, a competitor. His claws extended automatically. Bomi walked up to the young Vulturi, sniffed his leg, and wagged her tail. Soren's tail wagged back. The video of Soren playing fetch with Bomi spread across the galaxy faster than any news story in history. Billions of beings watched a Vulturi cub and an Earth dog run across a field together, chasing the same ball, tumbling over each other in happy exhaustion. Comments flooded in from every species. Some were confused. Some were amazed. Many were angry, insisting it must be fake, that the Vulturi were too dangerous for such gentle play. But the video was real, and it was just the beginning. 1 year after the initial meeting, Yuna stood on the observation deck of the new Human Vulturi Cultural Center. It had been built in orbit around Earth, a massive structure designed by architects from both species. The corridors were tall enough for Vulturi, but warm enough for humans. Gardens grew food that both species could eat. Play areas rang with the sounds of children laughing in 2 different languages. Theska stood beside her. The High Matriarch visited often, though she claimed it was only for diplomatic reasons. No one mentioned that she spent most of her visits in the children's wing, telling stories to groups of human and Vulturi young ones who sat together without fear. "Do you remember what you asked me?" Theska said. "That first day, when Reckon bit your sleeve?" Yuna smiled. "I asked if I should tremble." "Yes." Theska looked out at the stars. "I did not have an answer then. I think I do now." "And what is the answer?" The old matriarch was quiet for a moment. Below them, in one of the gardens, Reckon was playing with a group of human teenagers. He was almost full-grown now, 6 feet tall and heavily muscled. The humans barely reached his shoulder. They were teaching him a game called basketball, and he was terrible at it, but he was laughing so hard that his whole body shook. "The answer is no," Theska said finally. "You should not have trembled, because you were right about us." She turned to look at Yuna with those ancient amber eyes. "We were alone. We had been alone for so long that we forgot what it felt like to have friends. We became the monsters that everyone believed us to be. And now?" Theska's tail wagged slightly. She did not try to hide it. "Now we are learning to be something else." A door opened behind them. A young boy came running out onto the observation deck, followed by a Vulturi cub only slightly larger than him. The boy's name was Taiwu. The cub's name was Mira. They had been inseparable since meeting at the cultural center 6 months ago. "Ambassador Park! Ambassador Park!" Taiwu shouted. "Myra learned to catch a frisbee. Come watch." The cub bounced beside him, her tail wagging furiously. She was smaller than Reckon had been at that age, but her eyes held the same bright mischief. Yuna laughed. "We will be right there." The children ran back through the door, their excited voices fading down the corridor. Theska watched them go with an expression that no being had ever seen on a Vulturi face before. It was love. Simple, uncomplicated love. "Our species killed each other for thousands of years," Theska said softly. "Humans fought wolves and bears and lions. You lost many of your kind to their teeth and claws." "We did," Yuna agreed. "But you never stopped trying to make friends with them. Even when it cost you lives. Even when it seemed impossible." Theska shook her head slowly. "That is either the greatest wisdom or the greatest madness I have ever encountered." "It might be both," Yuna said. "Yes." Theska placed her hand on Yuna's shoulder. The gesture had become natural between them, though it would have meant death a year ago. "It might be both. And I am grateful for it." They walked together toward the gardens, following the sound of children's laughter. Behind them, through the observation windows, Stars gleamed in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, other species were watching, learning, wondering if they too could find a place in this strange new friendship. Some of them were already reaching out. The Kirathi had sent their first ambassadors to Earth last month. The Malkori were asking questions about human diplomacy techniques. Even species that had never dared approach the Vulturi before were suddenly curious about this small blue planet and its odd inhabitants. Humans did not conquer the galaxy with weapons or technology. They did not defeat their enemies with superior force. They did something far more difficult and far more powerful. They made friends. One predator at a time. One wagging tail at a time. One game of fetch. One belly rub, one moment of trust at a time. And the galaxy would never be the same. In the garden below, Reckon finally made a basket. The human teenagers cheered. Taiwu lifted Mira onto his shoulders so she could see better. Somewhere in the crowd, a Vulturi guard was learning to play rock, paper, scissors with a group of human engineers. Yuna watched it all with the same warm smile she had worn when a predator cub first bit her sleeve. That moment had changed everything. Not because of what she did, but because of what it revealed about humanity. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the most advanced. But they were the ones who looked at monsters and saw friends. They were the ones who tugged back. And that, in the end, was what mattered most.